The ANC Women's League has delivered a memorandum to Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana during a march to the National Treasury in Pretoria this morning. They say the department has failed to allocate funding to fight and deal with gender-based violence and femicide cases, despite President Cyril Ramaphosa having classified GBVF a national disaster. The classification helps improve access to survivor services, emergency support, prevention programs, monitoring, reporting and oversight. SABC News reporter Samkele Maseko is with Minister Godongwana in Pretoria and joins us live with the very latest. A very good morning to you, Samkele. Perhaps just to give us a summation of those salient points that the ANC Women's League sought to raise with the Minister.
I am with my colleague Portia Chimombe, who are going to be engaging with the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, particularly around the issue of the memorandum that the ANC Women's League has just delivered to the Department of Finance Treasury on the issues of the disaster that was declared by President Ramaphosa on gender-based violence, where they've said that it has been a disaster classified by the President, but there have been no resources allocated to this particular scourge. A very good morning to you, Minister. I am with my colleague Portia Chimombe. Just on the issue of gender-based violence, we've just received that memorandum from the ANC Women's League. A year on, there's been no budget allocated to fighting this particular scourge, which they've now classified as a genocide against women on South Africa.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things. It is correct for them to raise the issue, particularly when we celebrate 70 years of a Women's March. That Women's March was a significant milestone in our history, and therefore suggesting that women has been in the forefront of the struggle, and therefore they should be reaping the benefits of that struggle. That sense is a legitimate core. Secondly, there's a legitimate expectation when government classified, not declared, I could say they were using this word interchangeable. It was not declared, it was classified. Classification and declaration are two distinct things, and how it's treated in government are different. The third issue is that since the classification, there has been a movement in saying, what does it mean in practical terms? And a number of work streams have been set up in government to say, how do we deal with this issue? As you can see, even from their memorandum, there are a number of interventions that need to be made in order to deal with this matter. Now, there's also a number of departments who, in their own efforts, have got in their budget, have got to contribute to the cause. Now, it may well be what the Women's League is saying, maybe we should not be making all the scattered dispersed efforts by different departments. Maybe we should consolidate that work. It's something we're going to be discussing with my colleagues.
So is it plausible, the idea that there could be a ring-fenced fund in terms of what it is that they're suggesting? Is it a plausible suggestion?
Depending what you want to achieve, let me just give you an example. One of the ideas that was hinted at in the past was, why don't you place social workers in each of the police stations? That could be one element which would not necessarily need a ring fencing, but go to the department responsible for that work. So already there are discussions about looking at women enterprises. There could be a department responsible for that work. But part of the problem is that we're not monitoring that work and coordinating it so that we should be able to explain and have a narrative to society.
Will you be having, or will you be allocating specific resources to this classification of this disaster in your medium-term budget speech?
In the medium-term budget speech, there will be a statement to the effect that, I don't know the numbers, to the effect that there's some work which have been done, and therefore there need to be an allocation in the budget. What that amount will be, what it will do, I don't know. But what is been discussed in cabinet is an attempt to deal with that issue. How, whether it's going to be a specific fund or it's going to be in the different departments with some coordination. I don't know at the moment.
In terms of the commitments that we understand have been made up until this point, there's been an idea that there be a 5 billion emergency response fund. And this is all towards, for instance, setting up 200 new sexual offences courts by 2028 and mandatory training for law enforcement. How much of that do you have as line items in terms of the medium-term budget?
Let me just say I've never mentioned the 5 billion figure. I would imagine I'm probably the first person to be able to mention that figure. What I do know, the working streams are dealing with others, and whether they've consolidated the budget, they've not submitted it to me yet, I don't know. It could be a consolidated budget arising out of all those activities. Mind you, in government, sometimes you get scared when they raise a big number. But when they raise that big number, it may well be that it's going to be over a specific period, because the absorption capacity may not be that people are going to absorb the money at a go. So that's why I'm saying I would be quite keen to listen to what people are saying.
Minister, speaking about budgets, municipalities have been struggling to provide services to the people. There are certain equitable grants that you have withheld from them. I'm told by last week on the 31st of July, most of these municipalities would have gotten those chunks of tranches of money amounting to about 7.5 to 7.9 billion rands. Has all of that money been transferred to those municipalities?
Yes. That I can assure you. When we make that time period, we've already worked backward and said, when will be this what is called bus random. So when we make that decision, we know that the system in Treasury would run the amounts.
Last week, you also met with the City of Johannesburg, the executive of the City of Johannesburg, and you thrashed through their finances. And so on. What were some of the key highlighting points that you, as Treasury, had divergent views on when it comes to Tshwane and to Johannesburg?
Let me say to you, there are no divergent views between ourselves and those two municipalities. What they acknowledge that some of the issues we're raising are correct. The issue may be how do we work together to make sure that the correction is made. An example, Johannesburg is also, you may also deploy some treasury officials to come and work with us in sorting those issues. So the issues we've raised are not being contested.
Minister, the issues that you're dealing with now are not new issues. In the long run, there's been talk about relooking and reviewing the electoral model in terms of municipalities. How much of a role do you, as the Treasury, have to play in that process?
Minister Hlabisa is running a process of the review of the local government institutional framework and financial allocations. My team is working closely with that team. Let me just say a couple of things. If you go to any municipality, you will find that in most cases, the things that are cost drivers, electricity, water, and personnel. Because in some instances personnel is growing, then it begins to crowd out even these ones. So in some circumstances, you will have to have the painful exercise of restructuring the municipality in order to achieve that objective. An example, if you take Johannesburg and compare it to eThekwini, just infrastructure budget despite the fact that Johannesburg is the biggest of all the municipalities in terms of budget, they've got 97 billion rand. But in terms of the capital budget, it's seated about 7 to 8 billion, compared to others who the highest have got 15, right? Others have got 12 and so on. But Tshwane and Johannesburg are at the bottom. So there's something that needs to be done to restructure the budget of those municipalities.
When you look at, in particular, Tshwane and Johannesburg, I'm interested in Johannesburg because Johannesburg is unable to pay service providers. You go to Johannesburg Roads Agency, they don't have a budget to fix potholes, they don't have a budget for roads, they don't have a budget to fix the city's bridges, which about 60 to 70% of them need to be refurbished. How do you then restructure that municipality? Are you looking at retrenchments? Are you looking at reallocations of budgets?
The restructuring is going to be done by the municipalities, not by me. They will have to be pushed towards the restructuring the municipality. For instance, they've got about 14 entities, highly paid individuals in the form of 14 entities. Now, in an environment when you can't fix potholes, you know what I mean? In some instances, it's a different thing. In PE, you don't have a cash flow problem. You've got a governance problem. They've got money. They're sitting about a surplus of about 3.8 billion rand, but they can't fix lines.
The Auditor General successively will talk and diagnoses what the problems are in the different municipalities. How well do you work with the Auditor General's office to ensure that there is accountability for some of the malfeasance, some of the incompetence that is often seen in many of these municipalities, to make sure that you can get things on an even keel going forward?
My work has got to complement the work of the Auditor General. That's a constitutional requirement. That's what the PFMA require. That's what the Municipal Finance Management Act requires. So the entire digital framework requires me to work and support the findings of the Auditor General. That's why in some of the conditions I'm attaching to municipalities, we're talking about fruitless expenditure, irregular expenditure, unauthorized expenditure. Those are rising out of the Auditor General's report. And therefore, I'm forcing the municipalities to deal with those issues.
When you speak about Johannesburg having 14 entities, there is one political leader of a certain political party who used to be a mayor of Johannesburg who's called for the collapse of these entities such as Johannesburg Property Company, George Co, Johannesburg Housing Company,
Why
GRA.
Why did he collapse them when he was a leader?
Well, I don't know.
You know, the problem is everybody who's campaigning in Johannesburg has had a taste of Johannesburg. Whether we talk about the DA, they've got about 3 mayors, as you know. The question is, what is new? Because they have governed Johannesburg in the past. All of us have done a governing in Johannesburg party. You can't simply blame one political party in Johannesburg. So what we need to do is we must also go to the structure and the administration, not only look at the political leadership of the municipality.
Minister, we are out of time, but I'm going to straight to this interview because there are a lot of pertinent issues that we're going to address. My colleagues at the office will have to forgive us. Busi Chumombe. PIC, a hot potato in the country currently, biggest asset manager within the African continent and in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. You've been fighting reportedly with the Deputy Minister, former chairperson of the PIC. What is happening in the PIC?
No. I'm not fighting with anybody in the PIC. What has cropped up are governance issues. Now, let me just give you, not me, the regulator, which is the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, is doing an investigation. The Auditor General has raised issues, what he called material irregularities, which have been submitted to the SIU. The board, the board chairperson, Umasonde himself, has asked the president to appoint an SIU to investigate. The public protector is investigating the PIC. All of those things point to a governance failure. Don't worry, the PIC is liquid. We don't have a liquidity problem in the PIC. We've got governance failures which have been seen by other institutions, not only by me. So you can't attribute it as a kind of a fight between the two of us. There's instability over there. Last Friday, I got a letter from the Reserve Bank governor. Although they do not regulate the PIC, they are pointing an important point that the PIC, by its very nature, is tentacles throughout the economy, is becoming a systemic risk in the economy. Therefore, they want to regulate it as well. So it's a point towards a governance failure, which the new board has got to work hard to change the reputation and implement proper governance in the institution.
Patrick Dlamini, the CEO, has been at loggerheads with the previous board and ultimately was fighting to be retained in this institution. Is he the right man to continue leading this investment asset?
I can't answer that question because there's a new board now. The new board has got to make an assessment because Patrick is finishing a year this month, right in July. Finishes a year. Can he be held responsible for all of this government failure, which you must know, PIC has been a subject of investigation since the Party Commission. So all of those point to government failures which Patrick has inherited. But that board has got to make a judgment call.
But it has been alleged that you have been the one who's been protecting Mr. Patrick Dlamini against the insistence of the former board chair, Dr. David Masondo, for him to be removed.
How did I protect him? They will not tell you. All that I've called on the board, I've said, can you guys appoint an independent investigation? Because all of you are clouded in this issue. It is better that to have credibility of the process, we need an independent investigation. That's all that I've called for.
Are you not worried that he who used to be a board member in the company that is the holding company of Lanseria that is doing business with the PIC now administers the PIC, which may be a conflict of interest?
No. Let me just say, Patrick was not a shareholder. Patrick was a board member of a company which is not under investigation. The company that is under investigation is a different company called Acapulco, right? And when he joined the board of PIC, the executive of PIC, Patrick did the right thing and resigned from that board.
But is enough due diligence being done about the PIC? I mean, you talk about the fact that it's a company that is far too big to fail, and yet these governance issues have been going on for the longest time.
Let me just say, it's an interesting thing about the PIC. The most controversial part of the PIC is 5% of the total portfolio of the PIC, is the unlisted portion. The listed portion, no problems at all. The problem with the PIC is the 5% unlisted part of the portfolio, which is 5%. That's a portion we need to keep a closer eye on, and we may have to take a decision. Do we need it? Those are the kind of challenges we need to decision we need to think about. In the current environment, is it not an irritation enough that we may have to shut that part of the business? I don't know. So the investigation and the board will have to advise me moving forward.
On this 5%, are you reviewing it at this point in time as the main shareholder on behalf of government in the PIC? Are you reviewing this particular 5%?
I'm not reviewing it at this moment because I'm saying that this is for investigation. I don't want to prejudge the outcomes of this for investigation. This for investigation will provide evidence on what are the appropriate responses or interventions government must take.
Minister, we've also seen reports of Paul Langa, who's got contracts in Treasury without deviation, or with deviations that were done, that has been highlighted. Yes, at PRASA rather, at PRASA, yes, at PRASA, not Treasury, at PRASA. But looking at these governance failures in these state-owned enterprises and procurement irregularities in all of them, and it's mostly highly politically linked individuals, and it's against the procurement processes, the supply chain processes of the country. How do you go about in curbing these irregularities that are happening?
Let me just say, the PFMA has got provision for the accounting officer and the accounting authority of that institution that have got to take responsibility squarely for that problem. However, as the Minister of Finance, we signed black and white a guarantee for Transnet, which Therefore, it's going to be important that I have a line of sight on those issues. But the responsibility is that of the accounting officer and the accounting authority of that institution. But I've provided guarantee. Therefore, I need line of sight.
Minister, did you take the DA into confidence when you reshuffled and rearranged the board of the PIC?
I didn't take any part into confidence. I didn't take any part into confidence. Of course, I did take some of the people in my office, including my deputy minister, who happens to be a DA person. I didn't take him into confidence.
Has this shattered your relationship with David Masondo?
Not as far as I know. We spoke even yesterday.
Has it shattered the government of national unity operations between the ANC and the DA and the ANC taking unilateral decisions?
Not as far as because there are no unilateral decisions. The decision we took was a decision I took in consultation with the Deputy Minister Sarupe. He knows the rationale of moving away from a Treasury Deputy Minister. It's objective. He knows it.
But the DA seems to have a different posture and different view.
The DA takes a political problem which is going to make things difficult. They're politicizing everything which does not have to be politicized. For instance, let me just give you now. I was discussing these issues this morning with Deputy Minister Sarupe. I don't have a problem with the DA co-sponsoring a legislative amendment to the PIC Act in line with the Party Commission. But because we're doing that, but for them to say that's a DA initiative is no longer, they're politicizing this thing unnecessary. You see what I mean? They like politicizing things which are being properly done.
Minister, thank you very much for your time. It's going to be rather interesting and engaging with you going forward. But on a parting shot, did David Masondo fail as the chairperson of the PIC?
It's difficult to, mind you, David Masondo went there in an environment when already there are governance failures highlighted by the Party Commission. You must understand, when we deal with an institution, to what extent is that institution ready, can be transformed? In my case, I think we've got to say the institution as a whole, not an individual, has not stepped up to the plate.
I ask you this question because it's the second time a Deputy Minister of Finance has been removed as the chairperson of the PIC. It started with Mundle Gungubele. It's now Dr. David Masondo.
I don't know the circumstances under Gungubele. In fact, it was during that period, before or after that period, that the Party Commission was brought into the equation. There has been governance failure, and largely, if you read at the party report, it's not reflecting on politicians; it's reflecting on management. So it's quite important not to jump the gun and attack Masondo without looking at whether that management, which these reports are going to reveal, reports are going to reveal where the governance failures have been.
And are you the one who makes the final, gives the final verdict about what is going to happen going forward after those investigations?
After those investigations, I report to the President. The President, maybe in consultation with Cabinet, will provide the direction. But I'll have to advise the President. That's how the system works.
But one may say there's been a sustained attack on Dr. David Masondo, starting from Mr. Rali Maumpelu, who said that there were some allegations of bribery, that Mr. Masondo may have wanted a certain portion of monies he may have gotten from the PIC for a certain investment. Then you've got the battles now with Mr. Patrick Dlamini and certain board members involving certain companies that I've mentioned, where they've got holding shares or they have monies coming from the PIC to fund their investment, saying that there's been this sustained attack.
Let me just advise you. Let me advise you. Let's wait for an objective analysis. You know, there has been sponsored article. We can say this one is where you guys also lose your journalistic ethics in one way or the other. If you follow what's happening in Sunday World, those are sponsored articles. Right? If people collect documents selectively and give them to a journalist, it's a sponsored article. So we may run commentary responding to sponsored articles, whereas there's an investigation which is going to give us objective facts. And we've got to work on the basis of those objective facts.
Minister, thank you very much for your time. How far are you with the medium-term budget speech preparations?
This time I was telling them I'm going to write them because a week before the medium term I've got to go to the World Bank and IMF annual meeting. So I'm almost there.
You're almost there.
Yeah.
A sneak peek of what we can expect?
No.
Okay.
Mind you, those weeks I'm a month before the 21st, from the 21st of August. I'm not not going to be allowed to talk to you guys.
Minister, thank you very much for your time. That is Minister Enoch Godongwana speaking to the SABC on an array of issues, from the fund that the Women's League wants to be allocated to the classification of gender-based violence as a disaster within the country by President Ramaphosa, going to the issues involving Africa's asset biggest manager, that is the PIC, and the governance challenges the PIC is holding, and also the issue that is sticky to many South Africans' hearts, the issue of local government, particularly for my colleague Busi Chimombe here, who covers local government extensively with our other colleagues in the office, looking at the city of Johannesburg, Tshwane, and the funding model of municipalities and the grants that have been given to these municipalities, and the restructuring, I repeat, underline, the restructuring that needs to be undertaken by Tshwane and the city of Johannesburg that is arguably failing in the provision of service delivery and infrastructure to their residents.